The earth is my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender of my planet, united with friends. I will save the earth.
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and this is Avila Making a Difference. And the name of our show today is Butterfly Effect, Epilepsy. And today, my guest is Erin Leyden. And Erin is the president and co-founder of the American Epilepsy Outreach Foundation. And she's the ma to Emmett, who is living with epilepsy. My second guest is Dr. Michael Kohrman. He's the director of the Pediatric Epilepsy Program at the University of Chicago, and he's considered one of the experts in epilepsy throughout the United States. And my third guest is Anna Marie Clancy, and she is also the co-founder of the American Epilepsy Outreach Foundation, and she's aunt to Emmett. Glad to be on the show. Because, you know, I had you on the show because I do not know too much about epilepsy. And that's why I want you to talk, and maybe we all are going to learn more about epilepsy. And first of all, what is epilepsy?
Well, epilepsy is, we define that as repeated seizures. And about 1% of the population has epilepsy or repeated seizures. A seizure is a organized electrical discharge of the brain that will cause people to have abnormal behaviors. And those abnormal behaviors can be what people see on television, a big generalized tonic-clonic seizure, where the patient will stiffen, may scream, will jerk and stiffen, and that may last for a number of minutes. It can be nothing more than a simple staring spell that interferes with learning in school. It can be a simple jerk of a finger that goes on for hours or days. So anything the brain or can do and tell the body to do can be a seizure.
And if one has a seizure, does he necessarily have to have epilepsy, or is it two different, seizure and epilepsy?
Well, you can have a seizure that's caused by a number of different things. For example, if your glucose goes very low, you can have a seizure.
And that's not epilepsy?
That's correct.
Okay. And Erin, you mentioned that you're the ma of Emmett.
Correct.
And how old is Emmett?
Emmett is now 4.
4 years old. And at what age did you realize he had epilepsy?
Emmett had his first seizure when he was 2.5.
So the first 2 years, Emmett was okay.
Right, just came out of nowhere.
Just came out.
Normally
A cold. A doctor can one after 2 years. Looks like one, if he lives 2, 3, 4 years, could develop epilepsy. Is that something that you got sick, got a virus, or?
Epilepsy can happen from any number of reasons. Certainly, very often epilepsy comes out of the blue. We often don't understand where it comes from. That's true about half the time, especially in children. And that's good news, because when we don't find a cause for their seizures, they typically tend to do better than when we do find a cause.
And then, Erin, so when Emmett was 2.5 years old, he was having seizures, and you started noticing some health problem with Emmett?
Right. Well, he was normally developed, and it just came out of nowhere one day. We were getting ready for bed, and yes, he turned to his side and started to convulse. Oh. And luckily, I knew it was a seizure, just because he's never done that before. I picked up the phone and called 911, and they were there in minutes. In
minutes. Let's say that the people, when she called 911, didn't arrive in minutes. What can a parent do to help the seizure if they don't know anything?
Well, the first thing to do in a seizure is to protect the patient having a seizure. Lie them down, protect them so they don't get hurt, and really let the seizure progress on its own. The good news is most seizures last less than a minute. Very rarely do they go on for more than 5 minutes in duration. So that most of the time better than 95% of the time, seizures are going to stop on their own long before the paramedics arrive.
Now, how many people suffer from epilepsy here in the Chicagoland area? Do we know, or are the statistics throughout the United States?
Well, the statistics are pretty stable throughout the world. About 1% of the population has epilepsy.
1%?
That's correct.
And do they all know they have epilepsy when they have the seizure, or do they live all their lives knowing that they don't have epilepsy when they have a seizure?
Well, many people who have seizures don't actually recognize they have a seizure when they have it. So that do everyone with epilepsy know that they have a seizure? Eventually, someone may recognize they're having a problem. They will, will have a convulsion. They'll bite their tongue. There can be lots of reasons that events happen that brings them to attention. In kids, often what will happen is a parent may be sleeping with a child in a thunderstorm one night, and the child has a seizure in the bed, and they've never seen one before. So there are lots of ways seizures come to attention, and then obviously, like Erin's son Emmett had a seizure that was right in front of us, right in front of you.
And Erin, you live here in the Chicagoland area.
Correct.
And did you do any research on where to find the best help for Emmett?
Oh, we did a lot of research, and that was kind of the problem that we saw, that there wasn't enough information out there. And that's why we started the foundation. So we did endless research, and we got a lot of information through Yahoo groups that are available out there, and there's a lot of caregivers on there that are living with children with epilepsy. There's also adult groups that you could go to for help, and a lot of it is through networking where we find the right help.
And is this how you happen to find out about Dr. Kohrman?
Correct.
And is the University of Chicago the only hospital here in the Chicagoland area that caters to epilepsy?
No, there's several in the area. And again, you just have to do your research. A lot of it is through networking, word of mouth. So it helps to join maybe those groups and see where the best care is.
And the reason why I'm concerned about epilepsy is that in our family, in my family, my sister, at the age of approximately 68 years old, had a stroke, and she developed epilepsy, and that changed her whole life. And she's a nurse, so when that occurred, she had some idea what was going on. So she knew that she had to get help. And Dr. Kohrman here, I had my sister at the age of 68 years old develop epilepsy. So it could range from 1 month to 68 years, or maybe older than that.
Well, epilepsy occurs throughout the course of a lifetime, unfortunately. The greatest occurrence of epilepsy is in the first year of life, and again in the last decade of life. The first year of life, it's due primarily to problems around the time of birth, and genetic causes such as problems with the body metabolizing proteins, carbohydrates, fats are the major causes. There can also be malformation of the brain and the way the brain develops that produces epilepsy in a fair number of kids as well. We see a second sort of spike around teenage years where patients have what's called temporal lobe epilepsy, where they may and have what we call partial complex seizures, where they sort of stop what they're doing, stare off, and then are unresponsive or sleepy, usually for 20 or 30 minutes after their spell. And that's the primary epilepsy that we see primarily from teenage on to adulthood. And then in the adults, we see epilepsy primarily related to trauma. A lot of epilepsy coming now from war-related injuries, now from brain tumors. We see it from stroke, and those are the major causes of epilepsy in adults.
And can one outgrow epilepsy? Let's say that one gets it at the age of 5, and maybe 5-10 years down the line, can he outgrow and the epilepsy is gone?
Well, the good news is we win 70% of the time when we take care of patients with epilepsy, meaning 7 out of 10 times patients will go on medicine, their seizures will stop, we'll be able to keep their seizures stopped, we'll be able to take them off their medicine, and they don't have more seizures. Is that outgrowing it? Does the medicine change it? That's not, I can't answer that question with absolute certainty, but certainly that's the good news. On the other hand, there are about 30% of patients, about half of whom have to stay on medicine and don't have seizures, and about half of whom who are on medicine, and we don't get their seizures completely controlled.
Can changing one diet, does that help also? Or
Well, there is a special diet for epilepsy we call the ketogenic diet, which can be very effective. It's as effective as our drugs. It's a very limiting diet, one that requires, it's like a Super Atkins diet, so it's almost all protein, it's almost all fat. About 80% of your calories come from fat. About the rest of it comes from proteins and carbohydrates. It works well. It tends to work better in kids than it does in adults.
Yes.
The problem with it is if you have a candy bar, there goes your ketosis, and you've lost the therapeutic effect of the diet. So while it works very well, it requires very strict dietary intake, and you have to be very, very conscientious about staying on the diet.
and then the way our society is, you have sugar all over the place.
Absolutely.
Right.
And what kid doesn't want a cookie or a candy
Yes,
bar here and there?
Right.
And that's why the diet has its limitations.
Yes.
Right.
Now, Anne Marie, you're the co-founder. You're the aunt of Emmett. How are you playing a role with Emmett? I mean, because Erin must have, must take up a lot of time. Maybe Erin wants to go take an errand someplace by herself, and she needs someone to depend on. So she probably calls you.
Right. Well, when Emmett first started having seizures, it was bad, but it wasn't, we didn't know how bad it was, and it got progressively worse. And it got to where he was having seizures every hour of every day, and then it was even every minute of every day. So we all took turns as a family going over there and helping Pat and Erin just do basic life functions, take a shower, check their computer, bring their other kids to school, cook some meals. It's a very devastating lifestyle when your child is having seizures every minute of the day.
And it changes one's life also.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know my sister, at the age of 68, her life has changed because she can't drive a car. And because of our economy in today's times, everyone has to keep on working. So, and she's a nurse, so she needs someone to drive the car for her, to take her to work, pick her up, bring her back, and it takes time. Now, we have a picture of Emmett, right,
Right.
Erin? And if Sherry could bring up Emmett, you mentioned he's 4 years old.
He's 4 now, yes.
He's 4,
He's a very
and he's
sweet
probably,
boy.
there's
Yes.
Emmett right now.
Yeah, Emmett's done a few commercials,
A few commercials.
so yeah, you may recognize him.
And now he's going to start probably preschool.
Yeah, next year, that's our goal. Well, he's in preschool now.
He's in
and
preschool now.
He's a little delayed. He's now, thankfully, a year seizure-free.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Is that a combination of diet and medicine? Prescription?
We've tried several different treatments to get where we are today. We tried 9 different drugs,
9 different
and
drugs?
a lot of those were 3 at one time, little concoctions or cocktails, as we call them. And the ketogenic diet he started, and it's the drugs alone were very difficult. I mean, a lot of times they're adult medicines, and so to see your child, barely be able to pick up his head or drooling, and it's very trying figuring out what combination is going to work at times. And like Dr. Kohrman said, 70% are very lucky to get control, but then there's that other 30% that are every day trying different ways to correct that.
And when someone does have epilepsy and the parent realizes, or the person himself realizes he has epilepsy, he just can't go to his general doctor, his general practitioner. He has to go to a doctor that specializes in epilepsy. That would be my opinion.
Right.
He can't go to a heart doctor.
No.
Right? To solve that problem, or a foot doctor.
Right.
So did you look up in the yellow pages? As you mentioned, you did a lot of research.
We did.
And did you find, is Dr. Kohrman the Emmett's doctor now?
No, he's not, unfortunately.
But he's considered the expert.
He is an expert. He's an epileptologist. And when we first started this, we saw 3 neurologists before we saw an epileptologist. We had no idea there was even such a thing.
Yes, I never heard of that.
And that's, again, why we started this, is we want people to know, tips on how to get the right care and what to do when someone has a seizure, and just things that people may take for granted, such as, you know, swimming alone. You don't want to do that if you have uncontrolled seizures. And, you know, they say don't lock the bathroom door because that is pretty much the most violent room in the house if you were to fall and hit your head on the
It's so
sink.
small
or,
space.
right.
Yeah.
So we have on our site information on, you know, things to consider, what to look for, and just different resources out there to help.
So let's say that a parent out there finds out that their son at the age of 1 or 2 years old has epilepsy. And what should they do first? Who should they consult first? What type of doctor? Maybe Dr. Kohrman, you can answer. What should step one? You know, the various steps that one has to do to find the right care for their loved one.
Well, again, it depends on the situation. In an emergency, they need to get to the local emergency room. So if the seizure is going on for more than 5 minutes, they should have called the paramedics, get them to the local emergency room, and get the help they need to get that initial seizure stopped. Try to figure out what's causing that seizure. Hopefully, they will either have pediatric care in that hospital, or they will transfer the child to a hospital where there is pediatric care, and they should be seen by either a pediatric neurologist, ideally initially, or if there isn't a pediatric neurologist in the hospital, an adult neurologist, so that they can be sure that the appropriate diagnostic tests are done initially. Once that basic workup has been done, then if there are still problems, if the epilepsy is not well controlled, they should be referred to an epileptologist. The key goal here is no seizures and no side effects. And that's really the mantra of epilepsy care today. And that should be the goal of neurologists, pediatric neurologists, and parents. And if that's not happening, then one has to ask, are we missing something? And that's when they should seek the next level of care.
And you know, on epilepsy, when someone has it at a younger age, he's going to school, the parents is taking care of him. But once he starts growing a little older, out of high school, wants to go to college, get a job, can an employer depend on a person doing his work if he has epilepsy? Or is that a problem, Dr. Kohrman?
Well, for the most part, people with epilepsy do very well in the workplace. For the most part, about 80 to 85% of patients' seizures are totally controlled with medication. So the vast majority of people should be able to work. The realities are, once an employer knows that someone has epilepsy, it is often hard for them to keep a job. It's often hard for them to get that job. So there's a tremendous social stigma associated with having epilepsy. As a group, people with epilepsy don't work as well as their brothers or sisters who don't have epilepsy. So they don't get to the same level. They don't have as often the same kind of adult relationships, friends, spouses. So they tend not to do as well in society as you or I do who don't have epilepsy.
And so your foundation, so is this why you started the foundation, to help everyone, regardless of age, that has epilepsy, Erin? Is that why you started this foundation?
Right. We started it because we didn't think there was enough information out there, and just we wanted to spread awareness, because our understanding was he would take a pill and he'd be fine, and that truly wasn't the case. So we just want to raise awareness. We want to educate people on first aid for seizures, you know, and to help families going through this, because it does affect everybody that's witnessing or living with seizures.
And this is your epilepsy outreach mission, then?
Right, our mission, correct.
Right, and so this is what you're working on the to explain the myth of epilepsy. And what are some of the myths epilepsy that we have, Dr. Kohrman?
Well, you know, I think the major myth today is that people with epilepsy are very different. And they're not, because you go out to a dinner in a restaurant, probably someone in that room has epilepsy. And they're just like you and me. And I think that's the biggest myth. I think the second myth is what to do in how we respond to folks when they do have a seizure, which is really to be very calm and take care of that person with the seizure. And then the other myth is that epilepsy isn't curable, because for the vast majority of folks it is, and we have lots of different things that we can do, from medicines to diet to surgery, all of which that can help to cure epilepsy.
And is alcohol help seizure, or does it create seizure?
Well, alcohol doesn't help seizures, period. Yeah. And it tends to increase your risk of having a seizure if someone has epilepsy.
And would you say that everyone will have a seizure in his life, but it might not be related to epilepsy, but all are going to have some type of seizure?
The vast majority of folks will never have a seizure.
Never have a seizure?
That's correct. Less than 10%. 10% of the people in their lifetime will have a seizure, but only 1% of people have epilepsy.
Okay.
So the vast majority of seizures don't repeat themselves, and half of those seizures occur in kids under the age of 5 who have what we call febrile seizures, where they, with a high fever, will have a convulsion. And that isn't going to happen except in those instances, and once they're a little bit older, they outgrow it. So, 10% will have a seizure, 1% have epilepsy, so most of us don't ever get anywhere near a seizure.
And I was showing before the show, I was showing this chart that I downloaded from the internet, and the chart gave the age group of when the first seizure occurring, and you were mentioning that at the earlier age you got a large percentage that has a seizure, and then as you increase in age, it's less and less, or what could you explain as one moves through life when the seizure and the percentage?
Sure. As we look at the lifespan, the greatest incidence of seizures occurs in the first year of life, and that's related to the fact that seizures are often caused by abnormalities of the brain structure and the way the brain forms. So if a baby's brain isn't normal to begin with, that's often a cause for seizures. There are also congenital or genetic causes that manifest in the first year of life. As we get on to the second, third, fourth, fifth year, 6th or 10th year of life, things tend to decrease. There's a little burst around 6 and 7 years of age where kids have staring spells, what we call absence seizures, where they'll stare off into space and may have 10, 15, 20, or 30 of these a day. They last 10 or 15 seconds, and they just keep going on doing what they're doing. And those things interfere with school and are usually very treatable. And then there's another burst a little bit around adolescence, where we start to see what's called temporal lobe epilepsy, or partial complex seizures, and then those numbers stay fairly constant until about age 50, where there's again another burst between 50 and 70, and those are related to stroke, brain tumors, and other injuries to the brain as people fall, hit their head, those kinds of things as they get older. And now with the Iraq-Iran war, we're seeing more traumatic injuries, and we're beginning to see more post-traumatic epilepsy as well.
I never realized. You're right. This war is a different type of war, and these kids are 18, 19, 21, 22, 23 years old.
And they're coming back with a lot of head injuries because of the kinds of involvement in street fighting.
And and I think this is where your foundation is helping, because at least they have a place to go to. You mentioned a caregiver, or that they need someone that understands them and be a caregiver, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and even teachers could go there and understand more what's going on with the child that's having seizures, or the student. Caregivers, parents, or grandparents could even go to it and educate themselves. We just want to get the facts out there, and to allow these families that are living with it to have a place. And for support, they could email us any questions, and we usually try to respond within 24 hours, whether it be from a trained volunteer or from someone from our medical advisory board, and just to kind of point them in the right direction.
Now, do you foresee your foundation, I was right before the show, we were talking about Little Mended Hearts, where they have set up groups throughout the United States. Do you see your foundation going that way? Also, outreach growing to other states, other parts of the country?
Yes, I mean, we would love to be national, and we're actually working on that currently. We have a national spokesperson, Hunter Tylo.
Hunter Tyler?
She's from The Bold and the Beautiful, and recently her son actually, almost a year now, had a seizure near a pool and drowned.
Oh.
So she has now joined forces with us. She's done several commercials. She's come in for several events that we've had. She's a great spokesperson, an unbelievable person, and just very passionate about it. And she as well wants to change the face of epilepsy.
And this is your current plan now, then? Right now your foundation is just operating here in the Midwest?
Currently, but we do have outreach programs. We've helped a family in Seattle, someone in Boston, and so the word's getting out there, and I know the person that we helped in Seattle wants to open a chapter out there, and we would really like this to go national.
Now, do you have a chapter at the University of Chicago? Is there a chapter, a parents chapter there, Dr. Kohrman?
We have teen and parent groups at the University of Chicago right now for our patients. We have a social worker who works with our epilepsy program, as well as our nurses.
What do you feel, Dr. Kohrman, what can we do as a society? What part can we play?
Well, I think the key thing in society is to recognize that people with epilepsy are just people. And we need to protect them when they have a seizure, and we need to support them in the workplace and help them to function normally and to get the jobs they need to take care of their kids and their families, to get the education they need in the school system, and so that they get the support they need to function at the highest levels that they possibly can.
Yes, and so this is where your foundation comes in. You're going to work closely with University of Chicago. How many hospitals are there in the Chicagoland area that has an epilepsy program?
There are all of the major medical centers have epilepsy programs. There are 5 medical schools, and they all have epilepsy programs.
And I always was on the opinion that if I were to get ill, I would prefer to go to a hospital that has a school, because my feeling is that they're more advanced in how to treat certain patients.
Well, teaching hospitals are important, number one, because that's where new ideas come from.
Yes. 2,
we have residents, and they keep us attendings honest and keep us on our toes. And 3, that means that there are lots of different doctors who are going to ask lots of different questions to parents, and sometimes we get different answers when we ask a question in a different way, and that's really can be very helpful to answer a cause for a problem. There's sometimes when a resident comes up with an answer to the problem that I don't get because they asked the question in just a slightly different way than I did. And that's really important when it comes to working with people, is that the more times people ask a question, sometimes in just a slightly different way, you get a different answer, and that moves your whole process in a different direction. So teaching hospitals are very important to us.